Hey team, for those of you that were at our past December team night, you know that I shared something that had been kind of burning in my heart, stirring in my heart about the life of Nehemiah. And I thought I would go ahead and do a series of videos outlining everything we talked about this past Sunday and allow it to be something that becomes part of our culture in Battle Drums. And it's always going to exist on the website so we can keep referencing it and keep remembering all the things that God taught us. I think it's very important and vital for us as a team in this season of our ministry to really grab hold of some of the lessons we learned from the life of Nehemiah. And for those of you that weren't there, I thought what better way to share the things that God spoke to us than through a series of videos, so you can kind of get caught up on where we're at and what God's doing. Basically what I talked about was serving the Lord in Battle Drums with passion. And I talked about the life of Nehemiah and how he was a man, an individual, a man of God that served with passion. If you look up passion in the dictionary, it's defined as a powerful and compelling emotion. And the idea is that there's this drive, there's this emotion in our hearts, something stirring, a feeling that compels us, that is powerful, that accomplishes much, that gets the job done, so to speak. And I want to call us to serve whatever department or whatever ministry or whatever instrument God has gifted you with and given to you. I want to call us to, as a ministry, just to be all in, to give everything, heart and soul. And like we see with the life of Nehemiah, it's key to success. Passion is one of the keys to succeeding and to accomplishing great things, whether that be for the kingdom of God or not. If you look at the lives of people like Steve Jobs and people that have done some incredible things with their life, they were passionate individuals. If we look at Scripture, we see a lot of people that had passion and accomplished a lot of great things for the Lord. One of the main men, obviously besides Nehemiah, who we'll look at, is Paul the Apostle. He single-handedly evangelized a lot of the then-known world and shared the gospel with people. He was driven. He was passionate for souls. He cared about people. He cared about the gospel. He suffered for the gospel. As you study the New Testament, you see that this was a man with a passion for Jesus and the gospel. And as a result, the Lord used him to change thousands and thousands of lives. And it continues today in all of the things that he's written. A good way for me to illustrate passion for all of us, we've all experienced this level of passion. If you've ever been in love, that idea of when you first begin to fall in love and you're never sleeping, on the phone all the time and writing love letters and you're thinking about that person all the time. We can all relate to that level of passion, desire, this powerful, compelling emotion. Another great one would be when you started playing your instrument or started singing and using your voice. You wouldn't probably be involved in Battle Drums if you hadn't for some time, years for many of us, just dedicated time and effort and energy to your instrument. You were passionate about it. You wanted to do the best you could. Some of us wanted to be maybe rock stars, or you wanted to try to impress a guy or a girl with your skills or whatever it looked like. But I remember for me, I didn't sleep. I just played my guitar. It's all I thought about. And my fingers would be bleeding, but I couldn't stop. I just wanted to play so desperately, so passionately. And it's that emotion, it's that drive, that commitment, that passion, so to speak, I want to call all of us to in the worship ministry. It may be specifically for us, it's important because I think in music, you can plateau at a certain point. You can get comfortable. You can stop growing and pushing yourself. You can have this sense of, I've arrived. For many of us, I bet if you were to compare your passion and energy for your instrument today to when you started, it's drastically different. And so one of the things I've always had to do in worship ministry, music ministry, is keep challenging myself and calling myself to keep digging in and developing and growing the gift that God has given me. In fact, that's biblical. Matthew 25 says that we're going to stand and give an account to the Lord with the gift that he's given us. How much have we increased and grown and developed? And that's going to be something that we're going to be held accountable to. So not even just for our own sake, or for the sake of the worship department, for the sake of when you stand before the Lord, he's going to call to account your gift. Well, with that, I first want to just start with this first video, noting and looking at Nehemiah and his passion and what he was passionate about. That's really what I want to focus on in the next couple minutes. The passion and what Nehemiah directed his passion towards. I'm going to read the first few verses of Nehemiah, and we'll see what caused and stirred passion in his heart. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hekeliah. It came to pass in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. Basically, the rest of the book of Nehemiah is going to be his response to those verses. So you might know that Nehemiah was a cupbearer before the king, and the children of Israel had been taken captive under Nebuchadnezzar some time before this was written. And Nehemiah was one of the results of that. He's a Jew living in a foreign land, and at this time he's a cupbearer, which is a very important role. And at some point, we're told that some of his brothers, some of the other Jewish men came to him, and he asked for a report. How is our city, the city that Nebuchadnezzar burned to the ground, the city that we got displaced from? How is the city? How are the people there? And it's at that point that he hears this report that the survivors who are left there are in great distress and reproach. The people of God are in reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem that surrounded the city is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. And again, the rest of the book is going to be Nehemiah responding in a call to action, basically sent by God to Nehemiah to get up and do something about it. And throughout the book, we're going to see he has a passion. He passionately responds to these words. See, for Nehemiah, and this is what I want us to know, what was he so passionate throughout this whole book? He was passionate about, number one, the glory of God. See, the city of Jerusalem, the people of God, and the walls being burnt, and the people in reproach, Jerusalem, the walls, the temple that dwelt there, all spoke of the glory of God to the Jewish people. And Nehemiah knew if the walls were down and the people were in reproach, ultimately that reflected God. And his glory, so to speak, had been diminished by his people. Though God's glory could never be diminished, in his heart and in his mind, it was not only a reproach to the people, but it was indicative of their God. And so for Nehemiah, he cared deeply about the glory of God. He cared deeply about the glory of God as a result of the city being burnt, the walls being torn down, and the people in reproach. That reflected their God. Though it was their own sin that got them there, Nehemiah cared deeply. This was God's city. This is God's place. This is where God chose to dwell and to put his name there, as God said. So for number one, Nehemiah cared about the glory of God. And right now, that wasn't so happening through his people. God wasn't being glorified through his people. Number two, it was the people of God. We read in those verses that the people were in distress and reproach. And Nehemiah was part of those people. He was part of God's people. And so he felt stirred, and we're going to see this throughout the whole book, his love and his compassion and even passion for God's people. They're in reproach, and that didn't sit well with Nehemiah. He felt he had to do something. He didn't like that God's people were in reproach. So the glory of God, the people of God, and thirdly, the worship of God. As you know, the temple dwelt inside the city. And the temple earlier had been somewhat restored. But yet the walls being torn down and burnt meant that it wasn't protected. And so the temple was vulnerable. The people of God was vulnerable. And so Nehemiah was not only the glory of God, the people of God, but the worship of God. He wanted it to be protected. He wanted it to be restored to its glory days. And so he was moved to action. We'll see in the rest of this book. So those three things, the glory of God, the people of God, and the worship of God is what Nehemiah was passionate about. And it's those same ideas, those same concepts that I think you and I today, right now in 2013, are being called to as a worship department to be caring about and to be passionate about. In fact, if you think of our vision, that we be a community of people who are focused on Christ and passionate about Christ, and the congregation we serve, they have direct correlations to the glory of God, the people of God, and the worship of God. Those are the same things that we're after as a worship community. And I want to call every single one of us, including myself, to step it up and be passionate about these things. And in the next series of videos, we're going to see exactly what passion would look like in those areas. We're actually going to see 11 marks and qualities and characteristics of a person with passion. And you know what the end result will be? I believe if we all serve with passion this worship community, use our gifts and get behind the glory of God, the people of God, and the worship of God, or Christ, community, and congregation, like Nehemiah, we're going to see God do great things. See, in chapter 5, we learn about Nehemiah because of his passion and his commitment to these three things. In just 52 days, the walls were rebuilt in Jerusalem. 52 days. I want you to think of that. That's unbelievable. That's less than 2 months he rebuilt the walls of a whole city. And I believe we're not building walls, but God is wanting to use us to build and to commit and to pour into the same things that Nehemiah was about.